On this episode,
Challenger. There's a lot of conspiracy around that.
But to have that animation is so bizarre.
That hint that the cabin crew was intact.
Because I don't think we had even attempted to go to the moon after the 70s. In any event, that's really not important. The theory that we're going to talk about tonight is that they indeed did not perish.
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you're tuning in across the nation or around the world. My name is Shane Squarick here, as always, with my esteemed colleague, Mr. Phillips. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back once again for another episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies. Cheers, and welcome back to another show here.
Fucking go.
Before we get into today's topic, which is very, very timely, especially, it really doesn't matter when you're watching this, just want to remind you to click that like button, that subscribe button, that follow button, that share button is always a good one too. Leave a little comment below. If you're on Spotify, they have a really neat comment section, but on YouTube, they do as well. We are on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, Spotify, Instagram, X, just about everywhere you can be. But those likes and subscribes really do help us out. Gets our name out there, allows us to keep on doing this stuff for each and every one of you. Shameless plugs out of the way. Tonight, Mr. Phillips, we're talking about something super timely that we've kind of had chalked up on our calendar for, I don't know, 6 months?
At least.
It's been a while.
For this day.
And we almost recorded it a couple times, and for whatever reason, it kept getting bumped. And coincidentally, as we were making up our schedule for 2025, I wrote this one down as like a must schedule, and I put it on our recording schedule, and just coincidentally looked at the dates of when the anniversary would be, and here we go.
Look at that.
If you haven't read the description of the event already or the session already, we're talking Challenger. We're talking the Challenger explosion specifically, which is a rocket launch. You want to go into the specifics here?
Yeah, so in 1986, the Challenger, was a space shuttle. It was a space mission. Do you know where they were going? It wasn't a moon mission, right? I think it was just a space mission. Because I don't think we had even attempted to go to the moon after the 70s. In any event, that's really not important. The facts are all crew members supposedly perished when the Challenger sadly exploded 73 seconds after liftoff. If you are around our age, you certainly watched that in school. Maybe not live in person. We weren't alive for that, but I remember watching it as a kid. Well, yeah, technically you were alive for that. I was growing.
I wasn't of age
fetus.
enough to remember that. I
Right.
was 1 year old at that point. It was 86, I believe, right? You said?
It was 86.
Yeah.
And I'm an 87 baby, so I was growing.
So I was alive. Maybe
were
wasn't doing
technically
much,
alive.
but I was there.
Yeah, you were hanging around.
I'm hanging around.
Yeah. So apparently, well, it didn't apparently explode. It did explode. And all crew members perished, sadly. The theory that we're going to talk about tonight is that they indeed did not perish. In fact, they may not even have been on the ship itself.
All right.
What do you think about that?
There we go. I hope we've got some intrigue from each and every one of you. This is a conspiracy theory that has been circulating around for, I guess, a couple of years, probably 5 or 6 years is when I really remember first seeing it. And from some of the research we did in advance of this episode, I was looking at some old Reddit threads, and that seemed to be kind of where everything sort of shifted back to about 5-6 years ago, give or take.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Challenger happened in 1986, so this is probably not the first time that people have had a conspiracy theory about something particularly related to our space program. but it seemed as though the reason this popped up is because a lot of similarities that a specific person, his name is something like really weird too. I think I'm gonna try to pull it up here. It was like Simon Guff or something like that.
Is that
Simon
one of the astronauts?
No. It was like
okay.
some user on like a forum named Simon Shack. Just for whatever reason, gravitated to this particular this Challenger explosion, and started finding a lot of anomalies that kind of went along with it as pertains to the astronauts. Before we start diving down those rabbit holes, because I think they're really intriguing, and that's going to probably consume most of the episode. There was a lot going on with the Challenger at this particular time. The space program was kind of hanging on by a thread, didn't have a whole lot of funding, and this particular mission, I think as you said, it wasn't a moon landing mission or anything big like that, which, if you guys have watched this show long enough, we have a theory about the moon, whether it's hollow moon theory, which is a really great episode. Yep. The moon landing itself, some conspiracies on that too. Yep. So some shameless plugs for some previous episodes if you haven't watched those out. Both really cool. The moon could be brought here by somebody else entirely, and maybe we didn't land on the moon when we got there. But this was more so to garner excitement from the United States, the people of the U.S., to kind of get them back on board on NASA. It's kind of all played out at this point. Most of the missions they were doing at that point were routine. Nothing was really happening.
Wasn't one of the astronauts like a teacher, just like a common school teacher?
Read my mind.
One of the female astronauts. I don't remember who it was, but I remember that being a thing.
Yeah, so that was the big hook. Her name was Christa McAuliffe, and she was going to be the first civilian astronaut that would go up. Obviously, a school teacher, as you mentioned, based out of New Hampshire. And she was, I guess the hook was that she was going to conduct live lessons out there on a NASA spaceship. Really freaking cool. And so that was the whole big hook. Like, you're going to see this teacher up there. They're going to broadcast in all these classrooms and stuff. And, the idea was to just kind of inspire some confidence in here, inspire, your average kid now. Like, look, I'm a school teacher. I'm out in space. Now everybody get involved there. Which, again, what does it always come down to? How do you raise funds when you garner public interest? That would get more people willing to want to invest in that. Among that, conducting science experiments, nothing crazy, mostly routine stuff. It looks like they were going to deploy some satellites from some of the notes I'm reading right here. Some scientific and engineering experiments that included fluid dynamics, studying fluid behavior in microgravity, and then to observe Halley's Comet, which was, I forgot,
that's right around that time.
Yeah, visible in the sky at that time.
Was Halley's Comet the same as Comet Hale-Bopp, or are those two different comets?
I believe they're completely different comets. Yeah.
All right. Makes no difference. I was just curious. I remember Hale-Bopp when I was a kid.
Hale-Bopp, yeah, completely different. Both comets that.
Which one was the Heaven's Gate comet?
Different. Heaven's Gate probably was Hale-Bopp, because that was 95. Right? Yeah. So Heaven's Gate was definitely in the 90s. I remember that for sure. That looks like it was
suits
95.
and sneakers, bro.
Dude, they were something else. That'd be a great episode, honestly, to dive into Heaven's Gate.
It would be,
because the website still exists. You know that, right?
No way, does it really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The cult still exists, and it's a very small subset of it. And not to completely deviate here, but I forgot what the name of that cult, the Heaven's Gate cult, was, but they had a name.
Was it Branch? No, Branch Davidians was Waco.
Yeah, that might have been Waco. Heaven's Gate. Let me just look it up real quick. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to find it right away, and I don't want to screw up our algorithm too much here because it keeps grabbing our early words. But in any case, they were something else, and they existed for like decades, several decades, like 30 years, as this like little sect of people before they went off and did their thing.
Yeah. Netflix has a really good series. I think it's called How to Be a Cult Leader. I'm sure you've seen it. I know you're a huge cult guy, and they did a pretty lengthy episode on that. It was fucking wild.
Yeah, there's a whole series specifically on them that I watched at one point, which is highly recommended.
You know what I can't help but think of whenever I think of those guys? You remember the movie Dude, Where's My Car?
Yes.
You remember Zoltan? You remember that cult? They were all in fucking bubble wrap with those weird like short vests and shit.
I think it's because they were inspired by that.
Oh, I'm sure it had to be, because that movie came out probably like I don't know, like
2000s,
late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah. So bringing us back from Hale-Bopp to Halley's Comet, obviously back to the Challenger here. effectively, long and short of it is the comet takes off, it's being broadcast as things were that. I'm sorry. Yes, now you got me really thrown off here. Rocket takes off, being broadcast, and explodes on national television, which obviously sends everyone into a complete flurry and panic and freaking out, because not only are you seeing this explode on live television, but there's a school teacher on there, right? And obviously that's hitting. She's not somebody that signed up to be in this lifestyle. It was more a publicity stunt to get her up there and really change things.
You know, and it was also during the middle of the Cold War too, right? So what was going on through people's heads when this thing explodes? Yeah, it was 1986. That's we're talking about. The Soviet Union didn't break up until 1990, so you're still entrenched in the Cold War.
Okay,
the Soviet Union still exists. I mean, maybe it wasn't. It wasn't like the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? It wasn't necessarily like it wasn't the height of tense. It wasn't necessarily the height of it, but the Soviet Union still existed. The Cold War was still going on, and so like, what was the thought of the average person then, right? They, know to the. I don't think, at least, any type of tragedy like that had ever occurred within NASA, up until that point in time. And so, like, what's everybody thinking, right? Like, was it just an accident? Was it the Russians? Like, what the fuck is going on, right? So, panic. Good word.
Yeah. Going into the crash itself, I don't think there was a whole lot of speculation at the time that anything kind of nefarious was happening. Coming out of it, though, there were some inconsistencies, as there tends to be. And before we dive into the astronauts themselves, because again, I think that's one of the most captivating things, which is really hard to disprove, I wanted to talk a little bit about the reasons that people think this might have been a conspiracy, which probably tip people off to this. And stop me at any point or jump in at any point when you hear something.
Well, I can't wait to give you mine.
Okay. Well, they might overlap a little bit here, but I'm going to cursory talk about a couple of these. There's a couple here that have to do with like the wreckage and particularly the ejection seats. So I'm pulling up the notes here. I know somebody in one of our previous episodes got a little bent out of shape because I read one of the intros we did. I apologize that I can't memorize things off the top of my head.
You're such a piece
How
of
dare
shit.
me? My eyes came off the center camera here. We do have to take notes. Man. We don't read scripts. I will reiterate that from that episode, but we do have notes that we actually try to compile here. In any case,
listen, I've given 3 best men speeches all from the top of my head, right? If I didn't write that shit down, you think I'm fucking writing anything down for this? Not happening.
Yeah, honestly, we're too lazy to write things down.
Not for me.
And to comment to those people too. A lot of the times when we do this research, we're not trying to be experts on every single subject. I want to emphasize that. We are talking about this stuff, sometimes live on the air for the first time, with minimal research, because part of this is that we both researched this and we're not having this conversation until right now. So it's authentic to us. So, only a few people, or not even few, only one person really had an issue with it, but nevertheless, I had to air my own grievances out. Challenger. We're going to temper that explosion back down here. So Challenger was equipped with ejection seats, and NASA had claimed that they were disabled for this specific mission. But there are reports, taken with a grain of salt, that the astronauts may have survived that initial explosion and could have ejected because they have the seats. Only obviously to be quietly relocated for unknown reasons. There's also some official documentation, some leaked testimonies that hint that the cabin crew was intact. I'm sorry, the crew cabin was intact during the fall, and so the astronauts could have been alive during that descent.
Well, maybe they lived during the descent, but I don't think they lived when they hit the water, buddy.
Well, it's plausible. There could have been somebody there ready to take them right out of the boat or right out of the cabin.
Could have been. What are you drinking tonight?
Maybe not. Just a little vodka, a little club soda, a fresh lime in there, just trying to kind of get me into a big.
Is it Reka or Rekia? Reka.
It's Reka. Yep, like Reykjavik, Icelandic vodka. Part of that theory ties into, and this is very much unconfirmed, that there's claims of recovered audio from the crew. There's my little alert going off for us to start recording here. There's claims of recovered audio from the crew cabin that suggest the astronauts were alive and communicating after the explosion happened. So obviously that raises some red flags about NASA's timeline. And as I thought about that, Phillips, I don't think because the rocket exploded. Just for context, the rocket allegedly exploded because one of the O-rings, the way the rocket was built, they had sections that sort of fit on top of one another, right? And they were sealed with pressure with O-rings, not unlike like a scuba tank would be. And you know, when you tie in to the scuba tank, the O-ring tightens and flexes. You put pressure, it allows the oxygen.
Right. It should make something airtight. Essentially, right.
And so if it was really cold the night before, and there was some speculation. There's a whole nother conspiracy that two people that built the rockets came in and they were trying to call NASA and call off the launch because they really speculated these O-rings were going to break because it was super cold and that they weren't going to be stable anymore, so on and so forth. I wasn't going to dive too much into that. I'll let you if you want to. But nevertheless, rocket goes up, there's an explosion. To me, it's not mutually exclusive that there's an explosion and that the crew cabin is intact. Doesn't mean it necessarily kills everybody else. It could just break the ship up and people are in there. Maybe just trying to say like, hey man, like we're plummeting back down to earth. We're about to hit the water. What do we do? So there is no real proof of this audio. It's really just on testimony and leaks. Take it from a grain of salt from there. You know, it could just be completely made up. Anybody can say anything on the internet. But it wouldn't surprise me that audio existed. And it wouldn't surprise me either that NASA would come out and then say, no, you know, they died in the explosion, because it's much easier.
Well, it's the most humane. Right. That's the most humane way to present it, right? No. They survived, and then they plummeted thousands of feet back to the Earth. Right. And died on impact with the ocean, right? Like which ones you want to tell the general public? Right, exactly.
They were in a steel box.
Yeah, and exactly. Oh, so they actually survived the impact, but then they all fucking drowned. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're going to give you the most peachy clean explanation that they possibly can. And realistically, if the crew members of the Challenger did die that day, that's probably the best way to go, is to die in that initial explosion.
Absolutely. So sometimes not everything is a conspiracy with malintent. Even if this is the case, and this kind of goes against what we're going to talk about in the episode anyway. So that's like the, I guess the overarching view of what you could see out there in a lot of the conspiracy circles about, you know, what actually happened. Again, there's inconsistencies with some of the wreckage analysis, but I'm going to all chalk that up to assuming this really did happen. They're just skewing some of the details to make people feel a little bit better. So it's not, you know, you don't need to go crazy. I think some of those inconsistencies can be overlooked. Anything you want to throw in on that, on the wreckage?
No, not necessarily. That's all the research that I did basically said the same thing about the wreckage for the most part.
Okay.
I found something last night. I'll kind of tease it a little bit. I was doing some research last night on this, and I was using my new friend ChatGPT, which I've talked a lot about recently. I use that a lot for show notes and really more so to organize myself. But I went down a rabbit hole, and I always like to look for the why behind. And I found some interesting things that could lead to the why all of this may have occurred. If it was a conspiracy, and these people are still alive today, the why behind is pretty fascinating to me. So we'll get into that, though. That's
a nice little teaser. I like it. I was going to actually make you say it now, but we're going to let people kind of stick around towards the end of the episode and get the why out of this.
Let's talk about the other stuff first.
Let's just go right into the astronauts. So the big conspiracy here that popped up, again, it seems to be a couple years ago, was that there's these doppelgangers.
Yeah.
As I guess a lot of these inconsistencies start popping up, you get the Challenger, you get people that start to kind of latch onto the conspiracy. They're trying to find anything that they can possibly find about this particular explosion that makes this feel like it's a conspiracy theory. And this doppelganger theory comes up. Now, I'm going to get a picture here of the Challenger crew, and we're going to look at that first, because that's going to be probably the most important thing we have here tonight.
Yep.
Everything else can be...
While you're doing that, there was certainly some speculation when this occurred, based upon the research I did, that things were off. And it was... From what I could tell, it was like very niche communities. It wasn't like a general consensus where most people felt like, oh, there's something wrong here. But this goes back to the 80s when it actually happened, right? I think it's kind of resurfaced to like 5-6 years ago, all based upon this whole doppelganger theory. And that's probably the most fascinating part about the whole thing. And what hooked me initially, I probably saw a video on social media about it 5 years ago, and I was like, holy shit, like, these people look exactly like one another. So let's look at those people now.
So we're looking at these people right now. This is just our main crew right here, right? Look like ordinary run-of-the-mill people. I've got their names over here. I can probably pull them up for you real quick. Let me just kind of, I don't remember if you can actually see my cursor or not here, but we're We're going to roll with
Not
it
at the
anyway.
moment. Nah, we're good.
Well, I didn't even put it up there yet. Can you see it right now?
Oh, now we can. Yep, I can see it.
Okay, cool. We're going to start here. This is Judith Resnik, also known as Judy Resnik. I'm not going to give you too much background on these astronauts here. I'm just going to kind of give you what their names are, and we'll roll from there. This particular guy right here, his name was Michael J. Smith. This woman right here, this is actually our teacher right here, Christa McAuliffe. So again, not a real astronaut, just a school teacher, just coming on this mission as a little bit of publicity stunt. This guy right here, Challenger Commander Richard Scobee. Okay. This fellow right here, his name's Ronald McNair. Okay. And I think he was maybe the second African-American astronaut to ever, I guess, be involved in a space program like this. And this guy's name over here on the left is Ellison Onizuka. I'm going to go with. Sounds good enough to me. Okay.
All right, so those are our astronauts.
So those are our astronauts right there. Now, where this conspiracy comes in is this guy, I forgot what his name is already, like Simon Schmatt, whatever the crap his name is, some user online somewhere else. I'll try to get his name right again here because I guess it's fair enough.
Dude, I used to have that little space shuttle like in the 90s. Like I had a toy that looked identical to that.
To what?
You see that little space shuttle that they have over on the left-hand side of that photo?
Yeah.
I used to have
I feel
that
like everyone had to have
exact
that,
same
right?
thing, man. Yep.
All right. Oh, Greg Jarvis is the other one here too, by the way. Jarvis right up here. I didn't mention him.
Sorry,
I
Jarvis.
just saw his name there. Yeah, so there's not much of a conspiracy on him. He sort of gets forgotten and lost in the wayfindings here.
Yeah.
All right, so I don't remember what this guy's name is that found all this stuff, but he started doing some research here and comes to find out, if this was a hoax, right? If the government was spoofing this entire thing, number one, why would they do it? Obviously, that's the biggest questions in everybody's mind. But what happens afterwards? How do you prove this? And so what they end up doing, and I kind of lost our little riverside here, what they end up doing is looking up these particular astronauts. First one to bring up is right here. So we said her name is Judith Resnik, right?
Yep.
I want to pull up a new picture for you right here. I'm going to pull up this one here. It's going to be a several shares here that we're going to have to go through.
Spoiler alert, she's not the only one to teach things.
Well, none of them are, really. You know what? I want to open it right in my browser here because that seems to want to work easier when I jump back and forth to things. So I want to bring up this photo first.
Yep.
Judy Resnik, the astronaut from the Challenger crew we have, is over here on the right-hand side. After doing some research, it turns out that there is also a Judy Resnik who is a law professor who is alive and well.
Yes, she is.
Let that sink in for a little bit right there. Judy Resnik was born, the Challenger's Judy Resnik was born on April 5th, 1949. She has a PhD in electrical engineering, was the first Jewish American astronaut to go into space, and the second female American astronaut. At the time that this was found, and I guess that this has really be publicized, and I don't have an exact date on that either, it looked like she would have been 66. Okay?
Okay.
The woman over here on the left, that is a law
Also
professor.
named Judy Resnik.
Also named Judy Resnik. She works at Yale Law School. Also 66 years old. The exact same age. Okay?
And most importantly, she looks identical.
She looks very similar. The chin, very similar. Facial structure, very similar.
Nose.
Hair, type, very similar. Eyes, very similar. Obviously, she looks much older, but look even like the bridge of the nose. Very flat, pointed at the bottom. Very similar.
She looks identical. And look, that's not concrete proof that that's the same person.
Of course not.
But it's certainly very interesting.
Some people tend to argue
that picture.
that maybe it's just an angle, because with anything you can always find similarities, right?
Right.
Here's another angle. Judy Resnik,
Look at that.
our Yale Law on the left. Judy Resnik, our Challenger crew on the right. I mean, look at the teeth. This to me is the most telling. The front teeth are literally identical.
That's so compelling.
I don't know the name of teeth. I'm not a dentist here, but this next tooth next to the front tooth, again, very small, and then you kind of go into those chompers right there, right? Like, look at that. I mean, this is an identical. It looks like you'd Photoshop this mouth and then maybe add a little coloring there to show age. Wild. I lost your audio there, Mr. Phillips, so I don't know if you muted yourself or not.
All right, I'm back.
Yes.
So sometimes I hate doing this because when I start to venture down these rabbit holes, I look at photos like this and I'm like, I don't know how to disprove it. It's not that I 100% believe it just based on a photo of someone that looks like one another, but the similarities are so fucking striking, man, that it's like, how could that be a different person? Like, I'm looking at a photo of unless it's altered, unless it's doctored, right?
Of course.
You got to throw that in there as a possibility as well, but that's the same fucking person.
I mean, there are some things that I think are a little bit different. So the eyes look very different, right? Her eyes look like they're a lot more scrunched on the left-hand side picture, right?
A bit.
Eyebrows are a little bit different. Like her eyebrows tend to arc when she's a little bit younger. Could be an angle, just could be a product of how much she's smiling.
Or could just be age, dude. I mean, we're talking about the 86 was 39 years ago.
Right.
I mean,
Right. So you're right. You're absolutely right there. And that's where I've kind of reconciling it a little bit. There's no real scrunch in her nose. Like you can see when she's younger, she got a little scrunch in her nose there. Mm-hmm. But then if you look at her face, her mouth is just, I mean, every line in her mouth, like even off to the side, right?
Yeah.
Like you could see the same like dimples in her cheeks on that smile. It's fascinating how similar this looks. And again, I'm also like you. I'm reluctant sometimes in trying to kind of find something that doesn't exist. But when you look at this picture specifically, it is extraordinarily difficult to not think that that's the same person. It's extraordinarily difficult.
I'd actually seen. I couldn't tell you who it was. It was somebody on social media. There was a video, and this guy was, I want to say he was a reporter, and he was actually trying to track Judy Resnik down, and he found her. I believe it looked like he was at Yale, and she was like super dismissive of him, like really running away from the camera. Now, granted, maybe this woman has been hounded for 39 years of reporters and a conspiracy theorist trying to talk to her, and maybe she's just like, I can't handle this anymore, and that's more than likely the reason why she wanted to get rid of that guy very quickly, but she was very aloof, if you will, and I found that interesting, if nothing else.
I think I saw the same story. I was looking into that a little bit. I think you nailed it though too, I don't know that that's the first person that's ever brought that up. And honestly, like, I don't know that even if it was the first person, like, do you really want to get into this right now? Like, oh, I got something better to do, man. Like, I can't be bothered with you. You don't know what's going on in her life. So I'm not overly sold on that. It is curious. I would personally react with that with like a laugh maybe. That's kind of funny to think about, but you never know. I brought up a third photo here, and this to me is probably the most stark difference between all the photos. In terms of the two photos that look. However, I thought it was important to still bring up because we want to still show different context. In looking at this photo, again,
we're not trying to prove this
similarities. We're not trying to prove it. We're not trying to disprove it. We're just trying to let you speculate yourself here. And again, I don't see my cursor on the preview window here. I don't know if you could see it at all, but I'm again looking at the same things. The chins look almost identical. Yeah. Right. Her face looks a little longer as she's older, but again, could be an angle, just could be the way her head's tilted. The way she smiles and like the dimples in her face, very similar. The way her mouth sits, her lips, extraordinarily similar. Like, look at her top lip curls a little bit when she smiles. Very, very similar. The bridge of the nose, very similar. And this specifically, her eyes, unlike the last photo, her eyes look a lot more similar to when she's younger here. Like the smiles look the same, honestly. Yeah. And even the way, and this is the interesting one for me, is like the way her hair parts here and then here. Now, anybody can part their hair any way they want, but you develop a natural part, right? and you kind of work with that. And it's interesting that she'd choose a similar haircut, and the part
I don't
would
know much
still
about hair, but
be very similar. That's true. Yeah, a little baldy.
I don't have any.
I've learned it just from like having kids and like always trying to like I cut my son's hair for right now. Every once in a while I'll take him, but I end up having to cut it myself anyway. And I've just noticed that like his hair, no matter what I try to cut it as, and I've gotten better at cutting it because I just realized how his hair parts. And he got like calyx in certain spots, and if you just work with those, it's 100 times better. And that's why it's good to go to the same barber all the time because they learn your head a little bit. But digressing there a little much.
I do too.
What?
Go to the same barber.
That's true. Yeah, yourself, I guess, huh?
On a very technical level. I just saw him about a half hour ago.
Oh, no kidding. That's pretty
I
funny.
don't want to wear a hat today. I know. Imagine that.
So yeah, so it's like, there's certain things that are going to be very hard to change in your head. And I've spoken to barbers specifically about that. When I've taken my son in, I've asked, how do I get rid of this calic right here? This seems a little odd. And they're like, oh, no, you just got to work with it. You got to learn to deal with it.
Yeah.
There was something else that was very striking to me. And for me, it almost became kind of like the silver bullet, right? Or I guess the smoking gun would be a better, a more apropos
The smoking
example right here.
spaceship.
Judy Resnik, the shuttle astronaut on the left-hand side, and Judy Resnik, the professor on the right-hand side. Why is there a giant arrow pointing to her mouth?
What we got there? Does she
So-
have what is that?
In addition to your hair not really being able to part differently because it's just the way it's growing into your head. Another thing that you develop as you grow, and it is extraordinarily difficult to change, is the way you speak, the way you talk, the movements within your face.
Okay.
Both Judy Resnik, the astronaut, and Judy Resnik, the professor, purse their lips on their left side. You can see how it peaks a little bit. This is a grainy photo, so I apologize. I'm going to try to get in there as much as I can. But their
I see
lips
what you mean, though.
on the left side purses, and it peaks when they talk. That's very... I'm not saying that there's only one person in the world that can talk like this. I've seen plenty of people that kind of talk out of the side of their face a little bit more when they start getting fired up. It's just the way they talk, right? People do that. Like people have their own nuance. And that's why people always get so weirded out, like when they see themselves on video for the first time, is because I look like that when I talk, because they don't know what they look like. To everybody else, it's normal, right?
I can
This
deal
is
with that. I
interesting.
hate listening to myself.
Same basic concept, though.
Dude,
'cause
I
you'll
hate
notice
listening to
mannerisms.
myself.
But it's the same premise. You're going to say things. You're going to notice things. You're hearing yourself. You're seeing yourself in different ways. It's very hard to fix those things, whether you're conscious of it or not, unless you're intentionally trying to do it. And so to just be talking out to a room, your mannerisms aren't going to be changing. And it's fascinating. Now, I don't have the exact videos of these. I probably could have dug them up, but I'm not a huge fan of playing a ton of videos on here. But I thought this was an interesting example because you can see there in the middle of speaking, their lips are pursed the exact same way. Very,
they are.
very unlikely that...
And by the way, they still look identical. Take the
Still
look
look
out of it.
identical, right,
They both look
right.
like the same person.
Very, very similar. This is just an older version of her, maybe a little more raggedy. I mean, she looked like she was a lot more attractive when she was younger. When
She's pretty cute
hardcore
back in the
look
80s, bro.
Yeah. Get woke, go a little nutty. Now, one other thing I wanted to bring up here. This is going to require a touch of audio here. So you're gonna have to listen a little bit here, and after this, we'll start breezing through. I promise it will be really quick. This is from another YouTube from Quantum Dynamic, not Quantum Vitality, on YouTube here. Hopefully, you all can hear this. I know sometimes the audio doesn't work, don't really know. So let's see what happens.
I am hoping that the affliction that Steve Hawley had from the 41D mission specialist of the delays hasn't rubbed off on me.
For a very long arm, which is as long as a cargo bay, it's 50 feet long.
The image lets you see all of the current contemporary issues. All courts shall be open, or be remedied by due course of law. You can find these. The equal justice under law becomes what we thought courts were all along. It says equal justice under law.
Wow.
Now, the voice has obviously changed, as all of our voices do as we get a little bit
Not
older.
a ton, though.
Not a ton.
No.
What I found interesting is that the dialect, I guess, in which she speaks
Sure.
is identical, like the same twang in her voice, right? Again, you used to live up in Staten Island. It's very apparent when you speak, even though you haven't been there in 30 years. When you talk, you still have certain elements of that from where you come from, and it
Especially
comes out.
with you G and T's in me, baby.
Exactly. All of a sudden, it starts loosening up those vocal cords. And so I thought that was an interesting video. Again, shout out to Quantum Dynamic over here on YouTube. It's a really cool video there. But you got an example, too, of, I said that I should have looked up those other videos. Well, you saw them right there. You could see, if you guys watched that, maybe rewind it, the way she talked. And it's not like her lip is shut, but like you could see it's pursed a little bit as she talks.
Yeah. This is a big watching episode, guys. If you're listening, do yourself, don't do yourself a disservice. Still listen, and then when you go home, throw it up on YouTube and watch it all over again, baby. And
strongly recommend. Yeah. This is going to be a really hard episode to just listen into. Unless we're very descriptive, which I don't think we're going to be that descriptive there. All right. So that's one down. That's our girl, Judy Resnik. And I think for all intents and purposes, Mr. Phillips, if you could say on a scale of 1 to 10, where does Judy rank in the is she still alive index for you?
Dude, I know.
And mind you, this woman is not dead. She is alive.
Right. No, she's alive and well.
She's still kicking around.
I mean, on the surface, and without critically thinking, I guess, that's got to be a good 9 for me. I mean,
that's got to be a good 9.
The similarities are just incredible.
Mm-hmm. Very incredible. Again, it's one of those that when I first heard of the theory, I really didn't think much of it, and I kind of dismissed everything I saw about it. And Judy, for me, was one of the ringers. Like, that was a dead ringer. These next couple could be purely coincidence, but we'll finish off with one that I think will be a heavy hitter as well. So I'm going to bring up my old famous screen share one more time. Again, apologies to people that are listening to this. Pull over to the side of the road, maybe just camp out there for the next 30 minutes and watch. This right here is Michael J. Smith, who serves as an engineer, an engineer who served as the Challenger's pilot. Okay, we got Michael J. Smith there. Yes, Mr. Phillips. What do you think
Not
the
Michael
chances?
J. Fox.
Not Michael J. Fox. Michael J. Smith. What's the chances that Michael J. Smith also happens to have a doppelganger?
I mean, a spitting image, doppelganger.
That
Very
is
common
a
name.
Spitting image. Very common.
Very common name.
The most common name of all. Now, I didn't even
unlikely...
suggest this is also Michael J. Smith. They do have the same name. The
Yes,
exact
exact
same
same
name. The
names.
man on the right and the man on the left, the exact same name, Michael J. Smith. And use it professionally in that same way.
Yeah, and again, just like we looked at with Judy, I mean, if you compare his eyes, they're very, very similar. As he gets older, they kind of slant and maybe kind of droop down a little bit.
Yep.
Maybe a little bit of extra skin there.
Sure.
Nose is pretty similar. It's a bit of a different angle. The one of him when he was younger as an astronaut, it's dead on, or I should say head on. Dead on, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Head
right,
on.
the figure on.
Right. It looks like the photo when he's older might be a tad bit off to the right, or he's kind of tilting his head a little bit. But the nose, again, very similar. And then for me, just like with Judy, bringing it back to the mouth is almost identical. Now, granted,
Smile.
he's
I mean, look at the teeth.
Right. The teeth, almost identical. What do they call them? Like laugh lines, right? There's the lines around your mouth. They're much
right
more
here.
prevalent. He's older. He's aged. He's a little wrinklier. So he doesn't have that so much, but I don't really, when you smile and you get that little, like, right here under your cheeks here, right? I don't know what, I don't know what that, if there even is a technical term for that, but
probably is.
those characteristics there, I'm sure there
for
is. I'm sure there's some forensic term for that. I don't know what it is, but those characteristics are identical, man. Like, that's
ridiculous.
That's the same dude. That's the same dude. And this is what hooked me into this conspiracy. When I started looking at these photos, I'm like, dude, if they're not altered, like, how the fuck do you just, like, come on? This is mind-blowing.
Well, so do you know how they're not altered? Is you can find some of these people, like, on LinkedIn. Like, some of the ones we're going to get to in just a minute, I have them on LinkedIn. I'm looking at their LinkedIn profile, and I'm looking at other photos that they have that are spitting images. Like they look like the same person, and it's a different photo. So it's not. I don't know, man. It's just, to me, it's not that far off, or at least I can't tell anything that would indicate that this is a fake right here. At least these particular photos right here. Now, would you guess, or would you have it, that this Michael J. Smith is also a professor at the University of Wisconsin in Madison? Any guesses what he might be a professor in? What his subject matter in? What's his?
I have no idea, but I hope it has something to do with space.
It doesn't have to do with space. He is a professor, and he taught industrial engineering. The guy on the right.
Oh.
The guy on the left, if you guys remember my intro, was an engineer who served as the Challenger's pilot. So again, not radically out of this world. There's two people named Michael J. Smith, that are engineers. Certainly not. But that look this similar, striking to me. My personal opinion.
Yeah.
All right. Now we're going to go to the our girl here. Share this tab. Woman on the left. Christa McAuliffe. This is our school teacher.
This is our teacher. Okay.
Really the face of this Challenger mission at this point. She's supposedly selected at random to take this space in the Challenger to teach this class out there. Really lights the fire into this whole program. This woman on the right, her professional name is Sharon A. McAuliffe.
Quite similar.
Okay. Very similar. Christa on the left, I mean, you'd feel like, well, the first two, they had all the same names, so on and so forth. You'd think, well, what are the chances she has a different name? Until you find out that Christa, her birth name is Sharon Christa McAuliffe.
Shut up.
Her birth name is Sharon Christa McAuliffe. This one's name is Sharon McAuliffe.
Dude, stop.
She just decided, I guess, when she was younger, to go by her middle name, which is not uncommon. I've seen plenty of people do that.
Yeah,
and this woman's name is Sharon McAuliffe.
Why, but yeah.
I've never understood that either. Maybe it was a name for a parent or something, or a grandparent. They just don't want to go there.
Dude, that's wild. I did not know that.
Guess what her profession is?
Is she a teacher?
She is a college professor. 3 for 3 in college professors. She happens to teach at Syracuse.
Imagine that.
How absurd is it that they have the exact same name?
Yeah.
They're all college professors. Now, I've been pondering, too, what would be the benefit of being a college professor, right? Why? Why that? And I've been pondering this to myself, and I'll ponder it out to you as well. Why do you think that might be? Any shots in the dark here?
I don't know. It's really not. It's nothing I really thought of. I don't know. What did you come up with?
My inclination is that as a college professor, you can shoehorn them into that. Like, you don't necessarily, people are going to get really pissed at me for saying this, you don't necessarily need to have qualifications to be a college professor. If you want to be a teacher in school, like at elementary school, high school, you've got to have a whole lot more credentials. As a college professor, you could become an adjunct professor right out of the gate just by having professional experience. We've had plenty of those. For those of you who went to colleges, you've always had teachers that taught classes like that.
Dude,
so
Joe
I feel
Rogan
like
taught martial arts at Boston College.
There you go. Perfect.
He was a teacher.
So it's relatively easy to get in there and teach something. Now, I think you can also pad out a lot of they're making up new identities for these people, right? So why wouldn't they also make up a resume? I think they did. But when you put them in college, it's not following the curriculum that, let's say, a high school would, where you have to kind of know what you're doing to an extent to really be able to follow the curriculum, pass certain classes and so forth. Whereas some of these courses that they could be putting them into, they can kind of make shit. I mean, I literally know somebody that used Minecraft to teach literature, and that's what they did in their class. It's the most ludicrous thing on earth, but you just can make shit up, and like nobody's really going to question it because it becomes like college is it's like a thought class. I don't know if that makes sense.
Right, it's different.
Like,
there's not a right. Well, to your point, when you're talking about K through 12, there's a very specific curriculum that needs to be followed for every state. I don't know if any of that's mandated by the federal level. I think it's more so state. But, like, you have to follow that curriculum.
Right.
Like, you don't have a choice. You really can't deviate that much. Or if at all.
Mm-hmm. So,
but when you get to college, you can do whatever you want.
Right. And so with that in mind, I feel like
it
allows you to draw from whatever experience you have, and then you become more conceptual when you're talking to college kids. It's not going to look at the same. What I also think it does.
Go ahead, finish your thought.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, I want you to finish your thought because I'm going to change the perspective here a little bit.
What I was going to say is when, back in the 80s, even though we're talking, this is 39 years ago, these weren't children, like they weren't babies. You know what I mean? These weren't 21-year-old kids that were going up into outer space. These were older adults who had careers and had professions and were knowledgeable and subject matter experts within that field. And so it's not a huge leap to then say, okay, you're now going to be a professor at such and such university or institution, and you're going to continue to talk about these things.
Right. Right.
That's not outside of the realm of possibilities there.
Not outside of the realm of possibility, no. What I also want to bring up here is when you're in a public sector job, right? If the government wants to give you a whole bunch of money for doing something for them, what is the easiest way to do that? It's going to be through your pension plan, or it's going to be through kind of pushing you through a government job and overpaying the shit out of you. I'm not saying that colleges are public sector jobs. They're not. And I'm also not saying that they get pensions. They don't. But they could be funneling her in there, funneling money into school, paying her a little bit more than they would pay somebody else. She is confirmed an adjunct professor as well. She's not a full professor, which lends our credence to what we were talking about before.
Right.
I also found out by finding her on LinkedIn that she works as an attorney, or works at law firms, I should say.
Okay.
I don't exactly know what she's doing. Director of Employee Benefits in this particular one, chair of the Employee Benefits in this other one. So that's now 2 of the 3 that we've covered that work in legal. And she happens to be a Syracuse law professor, an adjunct professor. So again, you're kind of shoehorning her into these weird jobs, right? That, at the risk of sounding naive or ignorant, you probably didn't need to know a whole lot to get into them, to do them.
Sure.
You just need to know surface level stuff, and then you can kind of bullshit your way. Now,
going back to the government funneling in money, right?
Yeah.
Universities and professors receive grants all the time, right? Those grants.
All the time. Exactly.
Where do those grants come from, right?
Exactly.
A lot of them come from the federal government.
All of them come from the federal government. Yes, that's where the grants are coming from. Federal government.
Exactly.
Yep, that is a group of grant is. So yeah, that's perfectly said.
The very
great example. Great example. Now this could be entirely coincidental, but this Syracuse law professor right here on the right-hand side, Sharon McAuliffe, is a cousin of a person named Terry McAuliffe.
Okay.
Who was the governor of Virginia. Okay.
Okay, I'm following you.
And co-chairman of Bill Clinton's 1996 re-election campaign. And chairman of Hillary Clinton's 2008 presidential campaign.
Okay.
So Sharon, well, this one's Sharon A. McAuliffe. This isn't Sharon Christa. This is Sharon Christa over here. But Sharon McAuliffe, there's 2 people exactly the same name, Sharon McAuliffe. The one on the right, she's apparently selected at random as a school teacher on the left. The one on the right just so happens to be the cousin of the chairman for both of the Clintons' presidential campaigns.
Oh, I love anything surrounding the Clintons.
That doesn't have some layer of suspicion tied to it at all. Nothing at all.
And by the way, we didn't mention this, but the photos we're looking at, same fucking person.
Yes, we didn't even get into that again. Look at the chins. I mean, she's got more of an open mouth smile here. These photos are a little more grainy, so it's harder to see. But
yeah,
look at just the waves of the hair. The waves of the hair. I mean, the hair waves.
Very similar,
I go back to what you said before. They wave. Like the part looks identical. The bump in the back of her head looks identical. Her eyes look very similar. Her nose, again, looks very similar. The little smile lines right there, they look very similar out of her cheek. Now, she doesn't have them so much here. There could be a little Botox there. Could be a little bit of age. Maybe she's not as happy in this one, but her neck is the only thing that looks a little bit different. But if you look down here, towards her
it's
collar,
almost
then you
40
can kind of
years
see
difference.
this right here. Well, right. You're not seeing the Adam's apple so much here, but you can see it kind of right here. Not that she has an Adam's apple. She wouldn't as a female, but you know what I'm saying from that picture.
Unless there's a deeper conspiracy.
Well, that might be a really crazy one there. So I said I wasn't going to dwell too long on that one. I dwelled a little longer than I wanted to, but I thought that was some interesting stuff to bring to light there.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
look, the most compelling part about the whole theory are the people themselves,
Yes.
right? So I think it's time well spent talking and looking at those.
Time well
folks.
spent. Time well spent. This next guy, this one might be a little more of a stretch for me, and this one I'm not totally sold on, but I'm going to go with it because it is part of the deal here, and we can speculate all we want from here. All right, I got to share again here. Here we go.
Okay. The
Here
teeth
we're looking
immediately
at-
stand out to me.
Exactly. So, born on October 21st, 1950, Challenger's mission specialist, Ronald McNair, is right here. He's the second African-American astronaut, so I mentioned earlier, and had a PhD in physics, and would be 64 years old if he didn't perish in the space shuttle explosion. Again, I'm adjust this for the years whenever this particular article was published that I got all these notes from. It's probably 5 years old, give or take. If Ronald was still alive today, we think he would look like this guy, Carl McNair, who was an author, education consultant, and an international speaker. He is the founder and president emeritus of the Ronald McNair Foundation in honor of his brother. So what they are saying is that these are twin brothers.
Okay.
And this brother, Carl, is the last living, descendant of his brother Ronald, who perished away here.
Okay. I mean, I guess if you had an identical twin, it would be pretty easy to make you disappear because, hey, it's not me, it's just my twin.
Yep, exactly. And it's plausible that he did die. And that is his twin, right? Except when we look at our boy Ellison Onizuka, who also died in the Challenger crash.
Not according to this picture.
And this is his twin brother, Cloud.
Shut the fuck up.
Onizuka.
Another twin?
That's what I said. When I looked at my boy Ronald, I was like, all right, we're looking at Ronald and Carl. Like you said, the gap in the teeth, you're not gapping your teeth. I think this is
got that
very
stray
likely
hand.
going to be, that's a stray hand look. You're very likely, Carl's very likely going to be a twin brother or somebody else right there, right? You're
That's
not
probably
fixing that.
Carl. That ain't Ronnie boy.
And I pulled up his LinkedIn. Here's another photo of him right here. Again, he's got a nice big gap. That is not something that's probably developing overnight.
He has a nice bald brother though.
He's got a bald
Just
brother.
like me.
But when you're going to tell me that there's two sets of identical twins on this particular mission, there's two. The likelihood of two sets of identical twins serving the same mission.
And 3
It
fucking
just seems
teachers.
very strange to me, man. It seems very strange. Well, that's now talking about like the future aspect of it, like what their careers are later. That it is what it is there. This though is like if you're painting the narrative that everybody else is dead, how do you have two sets of identical twins? It just struck me as a little odd.
Yeah, that is quite unique there.
Yeah, very unique. Very unique. Furthermore, and I can't say this with complete validity because I didn't do these myself. I'm just going off of some other guy on the internet that allegedly did the work. They provided some links to archive.org posts with all the background checks. Again, it's old. I mean, I have the image here. I'll see if I can actually bring it up here. Let me see if I, you know what, this isn't really going to make a whole lot of sense anyway without some context in it. So I'm not even going to bother bringing this particular thing up. But if you guys want to search it right here, you can. But one particular person, it might have been the same guy that I was talking about. Let me see if I could find his name again here. Dr. Owen or something like that. This is in 2015. Posts some big long article. It's on archive.org. He's searching for the brothers. Okay. I'll just actually bring up the archive.org thing right here. Okay. Ronald and Carl McNair, and then Ellison and Cloud Onizuka. Searches for the brothers. He uses Ancestry.com to look up their genealogy. And again, I'm not going to read through all this for you all here. The long and short of it is, there's no birth history for either of the brothers. Okay? Now, there is birth history for Carl.
Sure.
And there is birth history for Ellison, but there's no birth history for Cloud, who would be Ellison's brother. And there's no history for Ronald. So, again, we go back into that situation. This does not seem likely to me. However, this is a grainy photo, right? So I don't know if maybe Ronald... Yes. I don't know if Ronald McNair, maybe they're not photoshopping things at that particular time period, but maybe there's another photo with him a gap. I didn't happen to see one. Here, I actually found a better photo right here. He doesn't look like he's any gap teeth there.
No, it doesn't look like any
he looks like he's got perfectly straight teeth. Really nice teeth, actually. Now, he does have a little bit on the side here, but...
blue suit.
Yeah, handsome fella. Nice looking guy. Here's the brother. I mean, he's got a massive gap right there. So I think that's...
it's very easily discernible that that's a different person. Just
now, I mean, their faces are identical. But if they are twins, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. But this one right here, less likely. Less likely to me. Right?
No, dude. I mean, had you not told me that he had an identical, or supposedly had an identical twin brother, I would have said that's 100% the same guy. I mean, even look at the lines, right? So that would be his left, our right. Look at the lines when he smiles coming off of his eye. I mean, it's identical.
Yep. Yeah.
Much older, a little heavier. Same dude.
Yep. Same crow's feet, same hair
crow's
part
feet,
right here. You can see again right there. Same hair part. I mean, very, very, again, if they're twins, that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Totally get
of course.
It. But the likelihood of having two sets of twins. Now Cloud here is a liquor education board member for the Department of Liquor Control in the County of Hawaii. So he works for the government. So far, of all the people we have here, right? We went through Judy Resnik. Actually, do I have my full staff list over here? The Challenger crew. Let me pull up that picture again. Let's do Challenger crew, and we're gonna pull up another image of that, and we're gonna look at them all again.
Okay.
And let me open this image right here, a new tab. Gosh, I love these things. All right, we've got Judy Resnik right up here. Judy is a college professor. Okay. We've now got Ellison over here. Well, I guess Ellison isn't really his real name. This would be Cloud. His potential doppelganger is Cloud. He works for the Hawaiian government. Okay. We've got Christa McAuliffe, who now Sharon McAuliffe works as an attorney and works in education. She works for as a professor in a college. Okay. That's what we've tackled so far. And we've got our boy over here, Ronald, or his brother Carl, who is an education consultant, a speaker, and the founder of a nonprofit. So again, you could posture that maybe he's making some money out of that. Maybe he's not.
Potentially.
Nonprofits can get a little sketchy there, but this is the one we least likely
can get very sketchy.
Can get very sketchy. Oh, and we got our boy right here. How can I forget about him? Michael J. Smith right here.
Yep.
Also a professor. So, government job, not directly government job, but education.
Easily funded by the government.
Education, nonprofit. We got two guys left. This guy, there's no doppelganger for. And we'll talk about
actually, there is. You know who his doppelganger is? Murr from
Impractical Jokers.
From Impractical Jokers. That's Murr.
There we go. We're starting that right here. There he is, Murr. It's too funny.
Murr, you lying sack of shit.
All right, so now this one to me, this next one is, like I said, Judy to me was the smoking gun. That was the best of the best. This next one, though, is probably my second favorite, okay?
Ooh,
we've got a guy named Richard Scobee.
Yep.
This is him right here. I don't even have to comment on this one right now.
No.
You want to tell me that there are two people on this planet Earth that got those crazy eyes?
I was just going to say that have those eyes.
Come on, man. I mean, the space, I don't know what it is about it. It's like when a kid makes a drawing and he just like draws the eyes off a little bit too much. And it's just like off to the side. Like it's so distinguished to me. Like
he looks like Steve Buscemi's character in the Adam Sandler movie Mr. Deeds. The fucking wacky dude in the town. He's got that fucking hat on.
His name like Crazy Eyes too?
Something like that, yeah.
Buscemi, Mr. Deeds. Oh God.
I mean, Buscemi has crazy ass eyes anyway, but they were even crazier in that movie.
Oh my goodness gracious! There he is. You're right. That's him. That's 100% him. 100% him. So Francis Richard Scobee, of course, we've got on the left. That's our guy.
Oh my God! Don't laugh with bronchitis, folks. You might die.
God Almighty. So Francis Richard Scobee is the commander of the Challenger space shuttle, and there's Richard Scobee.
Here we go with the names again.
Richard Scobee just ditches the Francis, which again we
cows and
learned
trees.
earlier.
Did you look into that?
So we're gonna get there. Richard Scobee is the CEO of Cows and Trees Limited. Okay. Cows and Trees is a marketing advertising company in Chicago.
Okay.
Not that unusual, especially when you go through the rest of the stuff. I have Richard's linked in here as well. I'll share that. That's not going to show you too much here. But again, kind of the same picture we just saw before. You can see the eye. I mean, the eyes are so similar. They're
Buscemi'd.
Yeah, it's completely Buscemi. It's so remarkable to me. Here's his concept for what Cows and Trees actually does out of Chicago: branding and communications, marketing and advertising. Obviously, we talked about before. Reshaping your brand landscape, blah blah blah. Senior level thought leadership on your business. If I had to guess, if you did the research, I bet you they have government contracts. I bet you they have government contracts.
Makes sense.
Right? And that would explain a lot. Now, what's really weird is I tried to pull up the website for Cows and Trees, but it looks like it's actually since been taken down.
Okay. Not good for a marketing firm.
Let me see if I can pull it. Not good for a marketing firm. No. Cows and Trees website. So maybe he's shuttered his business. I don't know. Okay. I'm going to pull up. Okay. So this is right off of his, maybe his Twitter account, but from a long time ago. On his website, when it was actually active, there was this like animation at the top of the screen. And this is what really caught my attention and why I thought this was going to be our second best one. This is what it looked like. It was a cow with a rocket strapped to its back flying around, and it made this like weird, like twisty shape, right?
Yeah.
Why is that relevant? Well, when you compare exactly that animation to what happened with the Space Shuttle Challenge disaster, it looks very similar, doesn't it?
Very similar. And why? And I get it. You're a marketing firm, so you want to grab people's attention with weird and wacky shit. Hence the name Cows and Trees. People go, Cows and Trees. What the fuck is Cows and Trees?
What the hell is that?
I gotta look what Cows and Trees is, right?
Uh-huh.
So I understand that, but to have that animation is so bizarre. It's such a random DMT thought. like why would you? Why in God's name would you ever pick that?
Yep. And what struck me more, and I couldn't source this. I saw it previously when I first came across this topic. I had seen this this particular tidbit.
I remember seeing that years ago. I forgot about it.
Yeah. Well, there was something else that I'm mentioning in tying in with that is that he was apparently really into astronomy and space and the idea of rockets. Like, this wasn't like a unique thought to him. So I thought that was an interesting thing. I don't know where I saw it, but I did read it at some point. I wish I could have sourced it again for this, but it just struck me as wildly unique. I guess that's the best way I could put it. Again, the website's since been taken down, so it's been hard to kind of find much on it. Actually, you know what?
Yeah.
Our friends at web.archive.org. Here we go. Let's go.
Ah, there you go.
Here we go. There it is.
Look at that.
Look at this.
You know,
I'm going to refresh the page. It's going to take a few seconds here to get going again.
Yeah.
You got a cow that comes in on a rocket strapped to his back, zips around. A guy that looks exactly like the commander of a rocket ship is showing now this. Cows and Trees is now powered by Noble. I don't know what any of this is.
yeah,
Can you
that's
scroll
weird.
here at all?
That's weird.
No.
And you know what? It would make sense.
Look at this.
Okay.
And then he crashes down. You have a cow that crashes.
Fuck, that was loud.
Are you kidding me?
That was weird.
Are
That
we
was
kidding
weird
right
as
now?
shit.
And then the rest of this
But
isn't going to work because the website's
It
dead.
would make sense that he might sell that business. He's older, right?
Yes.
You know, these guys are much older. They're in their 60s, 70s. They're at the time where people typically retire. So
Yep.
it's not uncommon
Not out of the
that he
realm of
would now sell his
possibilities.
business.
No.
Yeah.
My inclination too is maybe he didn't sell the business. Maybe he just took down the website because he was getting
Yeah,
too
it
much
could be.
traffic from this particular conspiracy theory. And if you're running government contracts, I mean, we just saw what that website looked like. For a branding agency, it really wasn't all that good. And that was when I pulled that web.archive.org up. If you guys never used it, great tool to look up old websites on the internet. That was a 2016 design. I mean, that looked like it was like a 1990s. So as an agency that postures to do branding, marketing, advertising,
Right.
communications, that's why I'm thinking if we did enough research on it, if we had the access to it, I bet you can find government contracts for him. Doesn't mean he's out of business. He could still be doing those government
Sure.
contracts, which then ties into the theory of everybody else we have. Everybody seems to have these again, not public jobs, but jobs that are very in line with.
Right. Jobs that would make it very easy for them to receive additional quote
Yes.
unquote funding by the government.
Nobody's going to ask any questions. They're set for
Right.
life. They just kind of coast. They can live a life. Living a life.
Sure.
They're choosing their own names
Yeah.
and living a life. Yeah, man. It's fascinating. It's mind-boggling, right? It's man.
Richard Scooby Doo looks exactly like his other boy Richie.
Richard Scobee. Also Steve Buscemi in that Adam Sandler.
Also
movie.
Stevie Buscemi's.
Gosh, here I've got a great mashup of everybody here. Oh, this quality sucks, but I guess we'll try to pull it up here. Yeah, it's really crappy quality. All right, we'll pull it. Oh God, I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to get this up here. This is terrible. Oh, sorry, folks, but this is what we got here, so I'm gonna bring it up anyway. Just kind of a little mashup of everybody here.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it'd be a little more worth seeing that. You can kind of get a gauge on what everybody looks like.
Yeah.
Here, I got one more.
Yeah, dude.
Maybe this is
Look,
a
you know, everything that we're talking about, there's no concrete, solid, super evidence that you're going to say is that's the smoking gun. I believe this 100%. But if you're a curious person and look, there can be 1, 2, I'll even really go out on a limb and give you 3 coincidences. But when
Yeah.
you've got 5 of them,
Yeah.
just based upon people that look like one another in and of themselves, statistically, it becomes less and less likely that they're just coincidences, right?
If you had to, okay, we already said right over here, our girl Judith is probably 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Scobee, 1 to 10. How confident are you they're the same person?
Dude, he's up there too. He's right there with Judy.
Yeah. That was my
He's
thought.
a
I mean, I'd say
9,
that's an 8 or 9.
9.5.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
one
right
bite, everyone knows the rules. That right there is probably a 9. Over here, Michael J. Smith.
He's right up there with him, dude. 8.5.
Say the same thing.
He's right up there.
That's the same thing to me. Like, I'm so confident in that one.
Yeah.
I'd say Sharon McAuliffe. If you didn't tell me that Christa's first name was Sharon, I'd probably put this closer to a 6 because I think there's a visual resemblance. I
but
don't
think
think
about
it's
that.
that
Think
close.
about that though. But just think about that for a second. To have somebody that looks enough like you to say I'm gonna put that on a 6 when we're
Yes.
comparing it to other people that look absolutely identical,
Right.
Like that's wild.
But when you factor in the fact that Christa's first name was Sharon, that takes it from a 6 for me and puts it at like an 8.5. Because again, I'm extracting out all of the other facts, right? Like all the other, they're not even facts, all the other speculations, because I don't want one speculation to lean into the other. If you get rid of everybody else and you're just looking at Christa McAuliffe versus Sharon McAuliffe, all right, they have the same last name, is what it is. Probably not that uncommon of a last name. They look very similar. Maybe not that crazy. again, all of these people are also the exact same age. When you look them up, you can look up all their information. Like, go to whitepages.com, start typing these names in for these people.
Yeah.
You can find their birthdays and their ages and then compare it. The dates could be off. The birthdays are probably off. But as long as they're close in age, that should blow people's minds a little bit. But then when you factor in this woman has the exact same name, it's just highly unusual. And then, of course, the Clinton connection for Sharon McAuliffe. That's, I mean, come on, man. Like, that's what's screaming to me that, like, this wasn't a random selection of this woman.
One of the most powerful political families of our time who have been tied to every conspiracy under the sun.
Yes. Unequivocally. And again, it's 10 years before Bill really sits as president, but you don't think he's got some power at that point? Like, you don't just become president in 10 years out of nowhere. Like, you've got power. You're building up to the trenches there, and Hillary was all over the place there too.
We could probably do a week-long episode on presidents in general. So, you don't just become president one day.
No. Ellison over here, that one to me, I'm uncertain.
Why? Are you uncertain about the way you're talking about the look?
No, I think the look is very similar. I could and I would. So I'm factoring in. I'm being influenced by official narrative too, that this is the twin brother.
Okay.
Okay. If you're gonna hide the guy, you hide the guy. The fact that he's the twin brother to me is plausible, and I think you have to extract the looks from everything when you're talking about twins, because if they're biological twins, they will look the same.
Sure.
Without seeing them both at the same exact, like, if I could see him at this age, if I could see the brother Claude at Ellison's age, okay, fine. And I don't know if that exists out there. So I'd love to see pictures of, like, I'd love to see Claude present photos of him and his brother growing up. I don't think that's possible. I don't think anyone's asked him, and I don't think he would have the obligation to answer anybody anyway. I would still say I'm like a 5.5 to 6 convinced on that one. Something about it isn't super convincing to me because he doesn't have the same backstory as everybody else. But I'm not ruling him out at all. Conversely, our boy Ronald and Carl, I don't think those are the same people. I think those are actually separate people. I think that I was going to say with the twin thing, I think it's actually plausible that that Carl was the actual twin, and they just said that Ellison had a twin and he became Claude. And when I merged those two theories in together, I'm like, all right, well, maybe they just like passed that off on that. Again, what are the chances there's two identical twins on the same thing? To me, very unlikely. But I guess it's not out of the realm of possibility.
This is one of those times where I wish I knew somebody that was like a mathematician or like really good at statistics and could like tell me like statistically what are the possibilities that all of these things would add up for just a group of 5 people to have all of these similarities. You know what I mean?
Thankfully, we have a friend by the name of ChatGPT. So I'm going to ask him, what is the statistical probability? What do you want to ask? That a group of 5 astronauts.
Well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's
6.
Oh,
no, there will be. Well, I think there's. Is there 7? I think there's 7.
Well, there's 7. Yeah. Well, I guess if you want to go to 7 because that's the whole group. That's the whole group.
That within a group of 7 astronauts, 2 have identical twins. Okay, I'm asking ChatGPT live right here for you. Of course, the only problem with ChatGPT is it wants to break down the whole goddamn the whole problem for me here. So it's literally ripping through it. Like, based on the probability, I'll just give you this as it goes through. The rate of identical twin births is approximately 3 to 4 per 1,000. So 0.3 to 0.4%. So 0.3.5% as a reasonable estimate. That's identical births in the United States. And then they're doing the randomized, blah, 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 real world contact. Okay, so here we go. The statistical probability of having at least 2 identical twins in a group of 7 astronauts is roughly 0.0257, or about 1 in 3,889. This is extraordinarily rare and likely why such a claim about the Challenger crew will draw skepticism and curiosity. So
that's wild.
0.02%. That's the hundredths place in decimals.
Yeah, that's like the mortality rate of like a big disease.
0.025%. Yeah, please don't say that. I don't need another ban here, folks. We can't afford
That's why I used the code.
we can't.
I'm cold.
We
I
can't
put my
afford
head.
another
You know what?
vodka.
I'm just throwing my fucking hoodie on. Getting cold,
so
boy.
Here's what I think might have happened.
Okay.
And then I'm going to let you go into the why to bring us home a little bit. I think that there's a strong possibility somebody died in that Challenger. And I think that when that rocket was coming down, you know, we hear those stories that we talked about in the beginning, that maybe some of the cabin crew were still alive, they were plummeting back down, and they got the different transmissions. And I think that's very plausible that they did survive. But I think some people may have still died.
Sure.
I think it's possible that the reason we don't see that other guy that was in the back, the guy that looks like Murr, maybe he died. I forgot what his name is off the top of my head. I don't feel like looking up.
I'm just going to call him Murr.
We'll just call him Murr. I think it's very plausible that he actually died. Greg Jarvis, payload specialist. There it is. Popped up in front of me for some reason. It was literally the only thing I had in front of me. So there we go, Mr. Jarvis. I think it's possible people haven't found him yet, but I think it's also possible that maybe he died. And I think it's also possible that our boy Ronald McNair died. And so his twin brother does exist. And that's maybe why he has a foundation in his brother's name. Because that's a little too on the nose to have a foundation in your brother's name to me.
Yeah, I agree.
How would that foundation even do? Don't know, didn't look it up, but it's an odd thing, right? I think it's plausible you had those deaths, and then instead of saying that we've got all these survivors, maybe there was a motive that would have made them want to hide those people and just move on with their lives. That brings us to the why. And that's where I'm going to turn the floor to you.
All right. So, as I had been sitting around and doing prep for this episode, one thing I kept coming back to was, what would be the point of doing any of this, okay? To have this mission, launch this rocket, explode the rocket, hide the astronauts, almost kind of put them into like a witness protection, if you will. Like, why? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of effort. There's got to be a really good reason, and you got to have a really powerful entity like the federal government to do something like that, right? So I started dicking around, and, you know, I didn't see anything really good, right? It was, you know, NASA, we talked about it earlier, wasn't nearly as popular. They were losing funding, and they wanted to use this to kind of highlight, you know, and showcase NASA and draw sympathy and funding. And I'm like, I'm really not buying that. I don't think a disaster where you killed a school teacher and a shuttle explosion on national television is a great way to get funding for your entity, right? So I got to thinking, and I said, well, whenever there's a disaster that goes on in the world, right, a lot of people think, or a lot of people will say, what's actually going on? That's the distraction. Okay, they're distracting you with this over here, right? You're the horse, and this is the carrot dangling in front of your face. But over here on the left side, this is what they're actually doing. This is what's happening. So I said, okay, well, what controversial events occurred shortly before, during, or after the Challenger explosion? And one of the things that I found was that there was an act passed in 1986, and it was the FOIA Reform Act of 1986. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what FOIA is, that is the Freedom of Information Act. And in a very rudimentary explanation of FOIA, what that does is it allows the general public the ability to submit these requests to these government agencies, and then that government agency is supposed to then give you all the information that is not classified to you so that you can do your research on it, right? Well, the FOIA Reform Act in 1986 specifically reformed the way that people submitted requests as it pertained to, guess what? Law enforcement. Okay? So now, I'm getting a little tingly. I'm like, ooh, okay, all right. So we passed this FOIA Reform Act that essentially protects law enforcement. And so I think to myself, okay, well, law enforcement, that's a very broad term. What does that mean? Are we talking about, right? I mean, obviously we're talking federal when we come to FOIA. So it has to cover federal agencies, right? So I'm going to read you a list of the law enforcement agencies that are covered under this FOIA Reform Act of 1986. You ready? It's a long list. FBI, the DEA, the ATF, U.S. Marshal Service, DHS, Department of Homeland Security, ICE, CBP, which is Customs and Border Protection, the Treasury, which includes the IRS. Other agencies would be the CIA, the NSA, the Postal Inspection Service, which I did not know was a thing, as well as some other regulatory and specialized, some regulatory and specialized investigation agencies such as the SEC and the Federal Trade Commission. Okay, so I got a little excited. I'm like, okay, well, we want to protect law enforcement. And when I say protect law enforcement, you really... If you're passing an act that is going to make it more difficult for the general public or journalists to get information on operations and things that these federal law agencies have done...
Interesting.
What could that possibly do, right? That can open up a larger possibility or breeding ground, if you will, for corruption, misuse, right? Things like that. And I was dicking around with ChatGPT, and it did have some pretty good information around that. And so then I said, all right, I got to dig a little bit deeper here. So I said, just like, what were some controversial things that had occurred or bills that had passed? What were some controversial events that were going on during that period of time? And the big one that stood out to me, my friend, was the Iran-Contra affair. Are you familiar with the Iran-Contra affair is?
It's funny because I was going to bring that up when you finished because I had seen something on that and I just brushed over it because I just didn't care about it. I just didn't think much of it. So it's funny you bring that up. I was literally just pulling up some notes here and I was trying to pull up a quick summary so I can bring it up in a succinct way. But go, because now you're really getting into it. Yes. Yeah.
So the Iran-Contra affair occurred between 80 and 86, and essentially what it did, or I shouldn't say what it did, the affair was high-level government officials who were selling U.S. weapons to Iran. Okay? Mm-hmm. We were selling weapons to Iran. And guess what? It all culminated in what year? 1986. That's when the story broke. So you have one of the biggest events in modern history where our own government is selling weapons to a foreign adversary. And when I say government, right, I'm not talking about the entire federal government. There were bad actors within some of these agencies in the U.S. government who were making boatloads of fucking money selling weapons to a foreign adversary, okay, which is going to humiliate these law enforcement agencies. They don't want information, as much information. They want to withhold as much information as they possibly can about this. So what do? We pass the FOIA Reform Act. And then how do we get everybody's eyes away from the FOIA Reform Act? Let's blow up a fucking spaceship. Boom.
I want to add one little layer to that.
By the way, all for entertainment purposes. I have absolutely no idea if any of that's true. I just thought it was really interesting.
Good thing they added there. There's also something called the Gander crash that happened on December 12th, 1985, when Arrow Air Flight 1285 carrying U.S. troops returning from peacekeeping missions in the Sinai Peninsula crashed in Gander, Newfoundland. All 256 people on board died. The official cause was ruled ice accumulation on the wings. Why does that matter? There's a lot of conspiracy around that, and this ties into what you were talking about. How does it relate to Iran-Contra affair? Allegedly, that plane was carrying a lot of sensitive military cargo, weapons they're potentially dealing with, and that a lot of the people that were on that plane had direct knowledge of what was happening there. They were probably using them as foot soldiers. They take out the plane. There's accounts of they're seeing flashes, so more like a bomb went off, potentially, instead of ice being on the wing. So that's a theory for another day, but this is why I bailed off that theory, is because it went into the Iran-Contra, went into the Gander crash. I'm like, well, this doesn't really add up. That was the distraction that they were positioning in a lot of the stuff that I was reading. Right. But what you said actually makes a lot more sense now, because when you tie in FOIA, it actually loops in three theories: Iran-Contra, Gander, and the FOIA, all at the same time, culminating in the distraction where maybe or maybe not you had a casualty. There's speculation there was nobody on board at all, which is why the ejection seats weren't on. Sure. They were turned off. But there's also, if you lean into the idea you said before that the money doesn't make sense, it does make sense. And I don't think one excludes the other here. What ends up happening before and after Challenger? Before, NASA is completely underfunded. They have no money to do anything. After, they get a huge surplus of money because now everyone wants to reinvest to make sure this has never going to happen again, or this is never going to happen again. And so all of a sudden they come back in, they dump a bunch more money into NASA, and then I think by '89 they're launching new spacecrafts up out into the solar system, and then it becomes kind of a big thing again for a couple more years. So,
you know, what we have found in doing this, right, is that when there is a conspiracy or when there's an event that then provokes a conspiracy, there's usually more than one reason for that event happening, right?
Yes.
It's usually not very cut and dry. And even conspiracies that were proven to be true, right? We're not talking about, I don't mean necessarily things that are just still considered conspiracy. And if you look at things that were conspiracy, right, and they were then proven to be true, they weren't done just for one reason. So you could have a multitude of outcomes, if you will, where people benefit, many different people, many different agencies, all benefit from this one thing happening.
Yeah, becomes a waterfall, you know, if we can kind of cherry pick what we need all over the place.
Yep.
And
I think, you know, when I was, like I said, when I was doing that research, that's the only thing that made sense to me, right?
Yeah.
Like it had to be a distraction for something else.
Yeah.
If it is a conspiracy, if these people are still alive, if this really did happen this way, it had to be a distraction for something else.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that makes sense.
I mean, we saw the statistical probability of having two identical twins on that staff. Not that those two are identical twins, two sets of identical twins. So it's the statistics is really, 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 really small. The statistics for having doppelgangers with the same name, of the same age, the same general look, almost everybody, you know, 6 of the 7, if you want to believe that. I still go with 5 of the 7 even. Again, very, very, very small. So this is one of those conspiracies that, like, I wish wasn't true because I'm so into the idea of outer space and astronomy. Like, I love that stuff. And every time we tackle one of these topics, it seems to be more and more that everything we think we know is just made up. It's fake. Yeah. From Hollow Moon, which going into that I thought it was ridiculous, and now I walked away from it thinking like, oh my god, like somebody put the moon there. To you know, our original moon landing, like the fact that like oh yeah, like we might not have landed there when we thought we did, and now the Challenger, and, like did you make this all up?
We didn't even do an episode on the fake NASA footage yet. I've seen that for whatever reason. It probably has something to do with my algorithm. But I don't know if you, but all over the place, I'm seeing videos of supposed fake NASA footage and astronauts on wires and shit that's supposed to be anti-gravity and then suddenly falling down. And so we need to dig deeper in that. We got to do an episode on that one of these days. But to your point, it does kind of hurt the heart a little bit because I loved space growing up. I still do.
It's my favorite thing.
Man, maybe we never went up there ever.
I know. It feels more and more like that. Those flat earthers are laughing at us right now after we've yelled at them several times. Love to hear what each of you guys out there think. You guys and girls that are listening to us, what do you think? Are we completely, absolutely out of our minds here? Are those photos convincing enough, or do you have stories yourself? I mean, I'm sure somebody out there has studied law in Syracuse University. I don't know anybody directly that's been to Syracuse, but I know some people that are in law, so I might even just try to ask them. But surely there are people that went to these classes, and I'm curious if it ever came up in conversation, either in jest or whatnot. If you've got a story about that, love to hear it. More firsthand accounts. Don't pursue any of these people. Don't go after them. Don't bother them. Yeah, please don't. You know, at the end of the day, whether they are who they say they are or they're not, for whatever reason, they're trying to live a private life. If they were on the Challenger, let them just kind of live out their days. This is for us to speculate and have fun with, not for us to go out and bother them. So enjoy your life just as they enjoy theirs. Do subscribe, leave some comments below, right down here.
Hit us up.
It's a big old
I like
spot there. We've
interacting.
been
I
responding
like
to
when people
everybody.
leave comments. I like talking to
It's
them.
been great. On any channel, guys. Conspiracyrealist.com. You can connect to us on every social media channel on there. Tim and I are both on everything. So we're both going on those accounts and responding to you. So we're not usually saying who's doing it because I don't think we get that many people that ask us questions. And we usually have the same opinion. But if it's that controversial, we'll argue with each other on the same account. But share it with a friend, guys, gals. And until next time.
Deuces.
So long, everybody.